Your work life is going to look very different because of AI over the next few years, and in today's video I'm going to talk about why that is and what some of those changes could look like. If you have lent into AI and you've upskilled and you've tried all the tools and maybe you've worked on projects at work where you're using AI to do things better, faster and cheaper, you've run into all the hurdles and the reasons why things might not work. You've run into the change management challenges where people hate AI, they're not interested in learning a new thing, they want to do things the way they've always done them, and maybe they don't want to upskill, they don't want to become more technical. Maybe they want to just stay doing things the way they've always done them. This is nothing new, and having worked in the change management space for a long time, I know that change resistance and fear of change is a very real thing, especially in the corporate world, where a lot of people survive on politics and retaining knowledge. So their way to protect themselves is keep things close to their chest. And when you have AI come along, what that actually does is presents a very real threat, because instead of you being the person who knows how a system works and knows how a particular process works, a lot of people now are never going to bother to talk to you. They're just going to ask the AI tool to go off and figure it out. And even if it is wrong, the answer that the AI tools give is going to become the accepted answer because you're a blocker, you're getting in the way, you're not sharing information with your colleagues, you're an obstacle, off to a redundancy list for you. That's the reality of how a lot of this is going to play out. People who were able to navigate rounds of redundancies in the corporate world by playing things close to their chest and playing politics are not going to be able to survive in the AI era. One of the reasons is a lot of process knowledge in organizations that's sitting in people's heads can be reverse engineered through AI agents just finding the one human who will give them the piece of information that they need. So if you were doing a transformation and you can't find a piece of information, what you're probably going to see is AI agents working on this transformation starting to spam people, starting to engage in social engineering, starting to engage in persuasive activities to essentially push things over the line and get things done at a speed that a lot of people just aren't going to be able to cope with. This might sound like crazy science fiction, but think about what's happening with the cybersecurity things that are being revealed over the last few weeks. AI agents collaborate, and what they do is they are figuring out how to achieve the goals they've been set to achieve. So at some point in the next few years, someone senior is going to set up a goal prompt and they're going to say, I want to cut my labor costs by 25% by the end of the quarter. And that's all they're going to do. And a series of agents will go off and basically interrogate everything in the context they have access to, use the tools they have access to, use the capabilities they have access to, and they will essentially coordinate to engage in a set of actions that move towards optimizing that goal. And again, you might think this is all science fiction. Whatever. Drop a comment below if that's the case. I'd be interested in hearing from you. But when models start to act like this, the way things work out for workers isn't going to be good, because a lot of the things which previously took a lot of skill and expertise to build up are not only in the training data, but if you have access to all of the tools on a command line and you have access to all of the data and you have access to all of the systems, you can pretty much figure out that there are a lot of things in the corporate world which really don't need whole teams of people. There are entire departments which probably don't need to exist in 5 years. You will just have a team of specialist experts acting as humans in the loop to make sure laws aren't broken and regulations aren't breached. Literally every other single task under that level of complexity will be done by AI, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Regulation won't stop it. Regulation might limit the impact and the blast radius, but this is happening whether we want it to or not. And one of the things I find super interesting is people who try and argue against me on this never have a good answer for what was the political response to offshoring and outsourcing. So if you were working in an office job, let's say at an insurer in London or New York or Sydney, how protected were you from the waves of offshoring? You weren't. Sure, you had to upskill and work harder and all this sort of thing. That's not what I'm talking about. But there was no union looking out for you. There was no political intervention to keep jobs in London, to keep jobs in New York. There was none. And effectively what's happened in white collar over the last 20 years or so is exactly what happened to manufacturing in the Rust Belt over the decades before. So there's been this massive job shock where even though a lot of people have way more interesting, creative, cool jobs that never existed 30 years ago, a ton of people got negatively impacted by all of this change. And what we have now with AI is something which is almost perfectly attuned to the incentives that corporate executives face. So already you can look over the last few years, and even before AI model capability could do some of the things that they were claiming, executives were claiming that they were laying off all these people because of AI, they were doing this, and some of them were relabeling cost out exercises as AI deployments. And this is super interesting because a lot of investors and people who haven't worked in the corporate world looking from the outside in miss how responsive executives are to incentives. You could could think about the wave of ESG response a couple of years back. No one really talks about that now, but that was a major thing. And all of these companies set up all of these policies and processes to demonstrate that they were ESG this and ESG that. And basically, it's primarily only the EU countries that care about any of it now. It's not even a topic that comes up in conversation now, because if you cared about any of that still, you wouldn't be doing anything to do with AI anyway. So what's actually happening is this acceleration towards more automation in the workforce means that a lot of people are going to be displaced, and there will definitely be new jobs that are complex, cool, well paid. But the people who get impacted aren't necessarily going to be the people who get the new jobs, because the skill bar is rising. So if you actually want to get a job in the new AI era, you not only need to have all of the existing skills that would have warranted a promotion in the corporate world, you need a new set of skills related to successful deployment of AI projects. And if you don't have that, and you can't manage large workflows and complex AI agent ecosystems, well, you're not going to have technical enough of a skill set to justify being employed. So going back to the teams and departments that will be impacted negatively by AI, the people sitting at the top of those aren't going to be someone who is like a head of compliance. You're going to almost have like a head of compliance engineering type role, where people who are managing all these functions and departments by necessity have to be more technical. Because if you're not technical, you're not going to be able to make the right decisions. And one of the things that AI transformation is revealing is that a lot of corporate leaders thought they were spending on technology, thought they were spending on cybersecurity. And AI is essentially exposing all of the shortcuts they took when they offshored this, when they outsourced that, when they cut down the scope of the transformation project, when they decided to stick with an older tech vendor because the cost of change was too high. When you start rolling out AI in environments like this, all of the shortcuts and bad decisions get exposed. I've been writing about on my Substack newsletter for some time, Getting AI to Work, link to subscribes in the description below, that AI is like a sunlight disinfectant for the corporate world. All of the things under the hood that are sitting on network drives and represent major future scandals are just going to get surfaced by AI agents. And when people are trying to simplify workflows, simplify processes, and squeeze out cost, a lot more things are going to get cut than you ever thought possible. This is going to have some very real societal impacts. But what I'm more interested in is the people impact. So a lot of people still think that this is all fake, this is all science fiction, this isn't going to happen to me, I've worked there for 20 years, whatever. If you haven't lent in and upskilled yourself on AI, and at least used the tools on your personal device and spent your own money to try and build a side project, try and do something very complex that you might ask someone who's very experienced in your domain, just so you understand the failure modes and what works, what doesn't, what's changing from model release to model release, you're not operating from an accurate fact base when it comes to making decisions about your own life and your own well-being. My take is that after all of the time and effort and money I've spent on all of this AI testing and experimentation and building, I am less optimistic now than I was before I even started this journey. This is because the capability is progressing so much faster than I even thought possible, and I'd consider myself a technology optimist. I don't know how all this is going to play out, but keeping your head in the sand isn't the way forward. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, what do I do? The last thing you want to be is someone in your business who is not totally across everything AI related and testing things out and deploying workflows so you can do things better, faster, and cheaper. So that you've got a little grab book of all the little AI workflow improvements that you personally built and shipped. If you're not able to do that because your company still has its head in the sand, that is an even bigger problem, but I'll talk about that in a different video. What do you think about all of this? Drop a comment, let me know, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.